Alright, what's going on, guys? Today we're back with even more Elden Ring secrets, a series that I did not expect to keep going even a year after release, but with a game as detailed and rich as this one, there appears to be no end to the secrets that have been hiding under our noses the whole time. But with such a large community and a ton of investigation going into finding things like these, we've got some good ones to share today. So as we dive into this today, you guys know we're chasing down 100k subs here on the channel, getting a little bit closer every day, so if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring and FromSoftware, and enjoy diving into the mysteries of this game, then do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It's a win-win for both of us. But let's start off today with something that has literally been hiding under our noses the whole time, and that is surprisingly the name of the DLC. After the DLC was announced and we learned that it was going to be called Shadow of the Erdtree, people were quick to find where this name originated from and what it actually meant. And oddly enough, one of the only places we've heard this before is actually not in the game, and instead from a year-old tweet from the Elden Ring account showing off various tips and tricks right after the game launched. And it reads, "You are the hope of the Golden Order, Tarnished. Your choices will shape the future of all who dwell in the shadow of the Erdtree." And I find this very interesting. Personally, I don't think it was a deliberate hint at DLC all the way back then, but what it does give us is some insight into what Shadow of the Erdtree actually means. When we think about dwelling in the shadow of the Erdtree, at first thought it probably means everyone inhabiting the lands between, but a much better way to say that would just be beneath the Erdtree, because the Erdtree doesn't actually cast a shadow. So what it does is really give us more to speculate about and ask more questions to figure out exactly what shadow means in this context. So why do you think they chose that word in that tweet, implying a sense of darkness to the Erdtree that is the primary source of light in the lands between? It's not really an appropriate description, but regardless, I just think it's crazy that we've already had the name of this DLC for over a year and not even known it. It makes me wonder what else has been hiding in plain sight that could end up coming up later. But if you really want to get into the trenches of DLC speculation and things that might tie together, then you'll have to go all the way back to Dark Souls 2, because perhaps the main idea of the DLC existed long before Elden Ring was even a concept, and I'll explain. The main speculation about the story of the DLC revolves around Miquella and going into a dream world of his alter ego, Saint Trina, and this comes from a very large amount of cut content that ties the characters of Miquella and Saint Trina together as one. But if you want some ultimate proof that Miquella is this God of Dream Saint Trina, you can still find it in the game. As shown by Cobalt Beetle here, the Fervor's Cookbook 3 describes techniques left by a man who was utterly captivated by Saint Trina and continued to search for her in his dreams. But the cookbook actually makes the Bewitching Branch, an item that describes how Miquella compelled affection. But the real kicker here comes from Dark Souls 2, and two shields known as the Spirit Tree Crest Shield and the Grand Spirit Tree Shield. And the description reads, "Shield of the blue spirit tree that is said to possess divine powers, appears in the allegory of Quella God of Dream, and can deflect spells by parrying. Once there was a boy who was easily frightened, until the talking tree of Dreamworld transformed itself into a shield to protect him." So let's start by pointing out the obvious here. Quella is spelled exactly as it is in the name Miquella, and this character Quella is also a God of Dream. And when you put that in context of Miquella's story, where he makes his own magical tree, there's a little bit too much here to simply be a coincidence. Now, it's no secret that Elden Ring and Dark Souls 2 have a lot in common, several similar story tropes, so like the tweet, I don't believe they were hinting at Elden Ring DLC all the way back then, but perhaps this allegory of Quella was a story that they wanted to tell and never got the chance until now, but we'll see when the DLC actually drops. For the next one, I've got a boss interaction that I had no idea existed, and you probably didn't either unless you play with mods. Now, a quick tip that many of us have probably picked up on by now to make the Godskin duo fight much easier is putting them to sleep. These two are incredibly susceptible to sleep and will stay asleep for a very long time, but it appears that FromSoftware actually had a counter to this in place, because it turns out that the Godskins have the ability to wake each other up. However, in the current state of the game, they can't. But let me explain. One of you guys pointed out to me in the Discord server that while watching a stream by Lil Aggie, in a randomized run after he put the Godskin Noble to sleep, the Godskin Apostle actually woke it up. Take a look at this.
Okay, I don't understand how the other one didn't, but... What the f was that? He woke him up?
So after watching this, I decided to try it for myself and could not get this to happen. So I asked you guys over on Twitter and we got to the bottom of it. Matt Gruen explained here that the Godskin AI has a parameter that if a friend is asleep, it can perform the action of waking them up. However, there's a bug due to the banished knights patrolling on the outside of the arena that prevents this from happening for some reason. However, if you're fighting the Godskin duo somewhere else, it unlocks this move, which is why it works in randomized runs. But we were actually able to find a spot in the game currently where you can see this action happen. If you go to Dominula Village to fight the Godskin Apostle and bring him down by the dancers, you can see the secret action take place if you put the dancers to sleep. It's a really interesting feature that would have made this fight a lot harder. Perhaps FromSoftware hasn't addressed this bug, since that fight is already hard enough. But as it stands right now, if we ever have to fight the Godskin duo again in the DLC somewhere other than Farum Azula, just realize sleep isn't going to work nearly as well. But that was a really cool discovery and honestly blew my mind. Up next, I want to give an update to a discovery we talked about in the last video. As I mentioned back then, since I've been playing the game with no music, there's a lot of sounds that are really interesting and stand out now. And one of these is a very, very quiet whistle that plays when you use the Erudition gesture. It's so quiet that if you have the music on or you're in a place with a lot of background noise, then you won't hear it. So quickly take a listen to this. But the actual discovery that we covered in that last video was that the gesture makes different tones when you are or are not wearing a glintstone helmet. But that's actually not true. As I've been investigating this more, I realized that there's 4 different tones that play when you use this gesture, and they're random every time you use it. I just happened to have some weird luck last time to where the same tone played when I was and wasn't wearing one of the helmets. But let me show you all the different sounds. Maybe some of you music guys down in the comments can let us know exactly what notes those were. The conspiracy theorist in me thinks there might be a hidden message or something, but in these games you really never know. Many of the creatures and enemies we can find in the world of Elden Ring are corrupted and mutated in weird ways, but perhaps one of the strangest are the Cleanrot Knights, who appear normal enough on the surface, but when you start to get a good look at them, you'll notice just how strange they really are. They inhabit the Scarlet Rot in the Swamp of Aeonia, and shift and hobble against their staves as if they're crippled, and they even have strange white tendrils that grow in and out of their armor. But one of you guys pointed out to me that a lot of the weirdness of the Cleanrot Knights is very similar to the Kindred of Rot, so much so that the Cleanrot Knights may be turning into these pests themselves. So let's discuss some of the similarities here. Right off the bat, we can notice that their posture is almost identical. The Cleanrot Knights lean against their halberds the same way the pests lean against their glaives. They each hobble the same way, and can both be found around Scarlet Rot. What's more interesting though is their behavior. The Kindred of Rot act like soldiers, posting as guards outside of potential new Rot gods. Now, the main piece of evidence for this is the Pest Glaive, which is wielded by the Kindred of Rot, and has a description that reads, "Glaive made from a hard, sharpened shell, wielded by the pest who emerged from the Swamp of Aeonia, slightly increases non-physical damage negation. Though men might recognize the keen intellect of the pests, evidenced by this spear's uncanny design, it will never be understood by them," which seems to suggest that these Kindreds of Rot emerged from the Swamp of Aeonia, and not simply from the Rot in general, which would give them a direct tie to Melania just like the Cleanrot Knights, and would explain how they know how to wield weapons. There is one problem with this idea though, and that is the larva we can find in the Erdtree. Although we don't have a direct reason of why these larvae exist, it does seem to infer the life cycle of the pests, and hint at them being born from the rot itself. But it could be a chicken or the egg situation, an argument of which came first, the Kindred of Rot or the larva. Or this is just simply the pattern that all life takes when it's infected with the rot. But I'm not really sure what to make of this one. I just thought the comparison was really cool, and definitely think there's more to research here. Now, I looked into this next one and it was discovered a while back, but I had no idea about it until just now, so I'm gonna go ahead and include it in this video, because I'm sure there's some of y'all out there like me who didn't know. But over in the northeast part of Lanedale, before the elevator to the Divine Tower, is a new friend that you might not have met. After the horde of dogs in the Leonine Misbegotten is one enemy that you hopefully didn't hit during your fight. The furthest dog along this path will not aggro on you, and is the only non-hostile dog in the game. He's like the friendly crow from Bloodborne, and will aggro if attacked, but why would you ever want to do that? I tried looking online and so far nobody's given him a name, so let's figure one out for him. Let me know your ideas down below. The most likely reason this dog is friendly is because of a missing parameter for him to aggro on the enemy, so there's not really anything you can do with him. But I do like to entertain the thought that FromSoftware left this parameter out intentionally so that we could have a little friend to find. It's kind of a habit at this point to have at least one enemy in the game that unexpectedly isn't trying to kill you, and whether that's to give the player comfort or make them feel bad in the long run for accidentally killing them, we ultimately will never know. One part of Elden Ring's map that has never really made a whole lot of sense to me are the giant skeletons that can be found buried in the ground, and why they're seemingly so unimportant in the overall context of the story and the game as it progresses. But you probably never realized just how massive these are. Next time you're in the giant's grave post, go ahead and take a few steps back and turn around. It really makes you question how these creatures existed in the lands between. I mean, this skull is so big that when you go to Caelid, you can still see it peeking over the giant's mountaintops down at you. To give a little comparison of scale, the Erdtree would be like a normal tree to these guys. Even Fire Giant isn't as big as one of these skulls. Moonlight Ruin over on Twitter actually found that Yorm perfectly fits in the eye socket, so it's just mind-blowing how big these actually are, and it's something I think deserves a little bit more attention when it comes to lore analysis. But in case you ever wondered, anytime you're above ground in the lands between, he can see you. For the final secret today, I want your help in unraveling a pattern that shows up all throughout the game that again has such a scale of importance that has yet to be fully realized, and will most definitely show up again in Shadow of the Erdtree, and that is the double helix, the DNA pattern that can be found all throughout the lands between. We can see it on the Sacred Relic Sword, the Fingerslayer Blade, the Crucible Tree Armor, the Envoy Horns, among numerous other weapons, in places you might not have thought of, such as Placidusax's heads taking this shape, the quote-unquote roots on the Elden Ring in Farum Azula, and perhaps this is even the shape the trees are taking in the DLC image, but we can also see an inverted form of this shape, an unraveling helix on the Godslayer Greatsword. And so the question is, why is this pattern so important? It definitely has a holy connotation in the lands between, with so many items associated with the gods in the Elden Ring taking this shape. But next time you're looking through your items or putting on a new set of armor, keep an eye out for the double helix, because trust me, you will end up finding it everywhere, and see if you can assign a meaning to it. But that's where I'm gonna leave things for today. I hope I showed you something that you didn't already know, and if I did, be sure to leave a like on the video. If you have a discovery that you would like to share, the best place to do that is in the channel Discord, which I will have linked down below, or you can find me over on Twitter. Either way though, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new to the channel, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There are always mysteries being unraveled in Elden Ring, and you can expect a lot more here. But with all that, I will catch you in the next one.